excited to have Jon Ferguson joining us today. Jon is a friend of the Covenant Church. He is the co-founding pastor of Community Christian Church in Chicagoland, where he provides leadership in new ventures. Community has grown from a handful of people to a church with hundreds of leaders and thousands of people celebrating at locations throughout Chicagoland. And Jon is also one of Community's lead teaching pastors. I also want to make sure you know that he has been instrumental in developing the B.L.E.S.S framework and really making it into what it is today. In addition, Jon has helped to lead the launch of New Thing, which is a church planting movement whose mission is to catalyze movements of reproducing churches. He is author of many books, including co-author with his brother Dave. They're brothers, by the way, if you didn't know that, of Finding Your Way Back to God. And he was recognized as a resource. The book was recognized as a resource of the year by Outreach Magazine. So, if you have not read Finding Your Way Back to God, you might enjoy it. Dave mentioned how that's the main kind of emphasis at their church, their mission, and you can read more about that in Finding Your Way Back to God. So we're excited to talk not just about B.L.E.S.S as a concept, but in more practical ways. What are some opportunities for using B.L.E.S.S in small group settings? So that's going to be our theme. And Jon, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle. So great to be with you. I was in on most of the earlier sessions today. It was fun to hear some of the background on B.L.E.S.S and the Covenant denomination. I love the theme and mission, deeper in Christ and further in mission together. And boy, I do believe we are better together. And that's I think in part what we're getting to experience today, as we talk through this. But Michelle, I have to say, I need to get a backdrop like what you have. Man, that's awesome. Look at that.
Totally, right? Yeah, no, sometimes when this is pre-pandemic, but sometimes when churches decorate to do their B.L.E.S.S emphasis, they'll send us pictures. If you have any pictures, people, send them my way. You just might be highlighted.
That's way cool. And I also want to mention that Sherry Benke is with me as well. And Sherry, you can wave if you want to. Sherry is one of our directors of our small groups ministry, and she is at our Yellow Box Naperville location. Sherry's been on staff for a number of years and has particular expertise as it relates to B.L.E.S.S within the context of small groups. So you'll hear a good bit from her, and then we'll have some Q&A. So again, just thanks for the opportunity. We're always excited to share in any way we can when it comes to some of these ideas. When Dave and I wrote B.L.E.S.S, we wrote it not only to help others share the love of Jesus with their friends and neighbors, but truth is, and Dave and I both experienced some of those same frustrations that I think a lot of people feel when it comes to, sharing your faith. I think too often, in spite of our best attempts, it sometimes can come off a little bit like a sales pitch maybe, or an effort to get somebody to do something they don't really want to do. And so I think the last thing any of us want is to turn somebody off in an effort to show them the love of Jesus, right? I'm guessing some of you, I grew up in a Christian home. I have great memories of that. I was super blessed in that regard. And I've experienced the impact of a life-changing relationship with Jesus. And so when you experience that, you want to share it with people. And we, quite frankly, were just having a difficult time finding a way to do it in a natural and authentic way. And so, truth is, putting all my cards on the table, we were frustrated personally, but we were also sensing that same frustration in the hearts and lives of the folks that are part of community, our church. Our mission, as Michelle said, is helping people find their way back to God. And I think most people who have found their way back to God truly hope their friends and family will as well, right? I think that's what it's about. But I think the people, at least that we were coming across, wanted to move beyond just hoping to actually helping, like our mission statement says. Our mission isn't hoping people will find their way back to God, it's helping people find their way back to God. So as we were feeling all these frustrations and beginning to seek some solutions, we also came across this doctoral dissertation. And I don't typically include dissertations
See how
in my.
John kind of just dropped that in the conversation.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah. Doctoral dissertation. That's
Yeah,
what
well,
we do.
When you don't have a PhD or DMin next to your name, you kind of at least let people know you've at least looked at those from time to time. But anyway, this one was particularly intriguing. And if you've looked at the book, it's in the book. I'll give you the snapshot view, but the title was Blessers versus Converters. And the study was based on two teams of missionaries that both went to Thailand, but they went with two distinctly different strategies. The converters went with the sole intention of converting and evangelizing. The blessers, okay, on the other hand, went with the intention of simply blessing people. They said, hey, we're here to love people in the name of Jesus, and we're going to bless whoever comes our way. And then the study kind of followed these folks for a couple of years, and some interesting discoveries. First, they found that the blessers' presence in the community resulted in tremendous amounts of social good, better society, greater community life. And interestingly enough, they saw nothing like that from the converters, which is kind of sad, right? But secondly, and I think this maybe was most surprising, the blessers had 50 times as many people find their way back to God, 50 times as many converts, if you will, as the converters. So, it's just one study, but I think it's an indication to get the best way really to love your neighbors and change the world, show them the love of Jesus is to be a blesser. But, truth is God's people were blessed to be a blessing all the way from the beginning, right? You look back in Genesis, Abraham was called to leave his family and everything he knew so he could go and bless all people on earth. And, I've got a few slides here. I think I should be able to bring up. Let me make sure I can do that, because I want to show you this verse from Genesis chapter 12. Can you all see that? Give me a thumbs up. All right, good. Yeah. God said, I will bless you and I will make your name great and you will be a blessing and all people on earth will be blessed through you. And that wasn't only Abraham's charge, that's our charge. And if you look in Galatians, we read that we are heirs of Abraham and we follow in that same pattern of blessing, not blessed just to be blessed and say, look at me, look how great it is to be blessed. No, we are blessed so that we in turn can bless others. George Barna led a really interesting study asking our friends and neighbors what they would value in a person with whom they would talk about spiritual matters. Okay, so I don't think he was really talking to Christians so much. I think he was talking to our non-believing friends and neighbors and coworkers and said, okay, if you were to talk to somebody about spiritual matters, what kind of person would you talk to? What sort of qualities would you be looking for? And our friends, your friends, my friends and neighbors said, well, three things, and I have these on the screen. First of all, they said they would like to talk to someone who would listen without judgment. Sadly, Christians are probably known as being kind of judgmental. People are looking for someone who would at least listen without judgment. Secondly, someone who will allow me to draw my own conclusions. All right, if I was to talk to somebody about spiritual matters, your friends and neighbors, my friends and neighbors are saying, hey, I want to talk to someone who will listen to me without judgment, someone who will allow me to draw my own conclusions. And then finally, someone who has confidence in sharing their perspective. Fascinating, isn't it? Not necessarily looking for somebody that has all the answers or knows the four spiritual laws or, whatever that might be. They're looking for somebody. Honestly, if you think about it, they want somebody to be their friend, right? But isn't that what Jesus said or did or lived? He was known as a friend of, help me out, fill in the blank. Sinners, right? Friend of sinners. And so I think we need to understand that it's not our job. And, I felt this way for a long time, I think too. It's not our job to convince, coerce, or cajole. It's our job to love people the way Jesus loved people. It's not our job to convince, coerce, or cajole. It's our job to love people the way Jesus loved people. And then let God's Spirit do the work of convicting and converting. And so sort of with that knowledge, that frustration, and doing some more research and study, we looked deeper at the life of Jesus and found 5 ways that he went about blessing the people he came across every single day. And interestingly enough, they form an acrostic that you could see. It's in Michelle's background there, B.L.E.S.S. And you may already be familiar with it, as I know some of you are, at least many of you probably are, but I want to just kind of walk through it quickly as a reminder. And then Sherry's going to dive a little more deeper in, okay, what does this look like in our small groups? How are we helping people actually live this out and find that encouragement and accountability that we all need in order to make this a part of our life? Because it's one thing to know it, right? It's another thing to do it. In the same way, our people knew our mission statement, helping people find their way back to God. That wasn't good enough. They wanted to actually figure out a way to live it out. And I mean, the good news was that they wanted to. The bad news was they weren't sure how. And I think B.L.E.S.S gives them those hooks to hang their hat on so that they actually can live it out. So it starts with the B, and the B is for begin with prayer. The B is for begin with prayer. And again, with each one of these, I want to kind of show you how, at least just real briefly, Jesus lived it out. I mean, when Jesus started his earthly ministry, Luke, the doctor and historian, tells us that Jesus went out on a mountain and he what? And he prayed. He prayed. And over again, we see Jesus retreating to pray. So I like to tell people, if you're not sure who God's calling you to bless, which is possible, you're like, okay, where do I even start? Who? Well, begin with prayer. Ask God to help you know who to bless. But then it's also a great way to begin blessing those people right away. We discount that, aspect, I think, sometimes of these practices even, but there may be no greater way to bless someone than to pray for them. I was challenged by someone a while back who said, there are people that you come across every single day, whether it's on the L or in Chicago, we have public trans, or maybe on the street, or, wherever you maybe shop for groceries, people that have never once had somebody pray for them. Imagine that. My mom and dad were praying for me before I was even born. And I'm not talking about stopping in the middle of the street and laying your hands on somebody and, making a big scene. I'm just saying a simple sentence prayer, asking God to bless them or to give you the opportunity to bless them. Man, think about that, the power in that. Maybe you may be the first person to have ever prayed for somebody, ever. That's crazy. So prayer is a great way to bless people. And, if you're not sure how to pray, I tell people, think about it like the golden rule of prayer. Pray for others as you would have them pray for you, if you're not sure what that prayer needs to be like. So B is for begin with prayer. L then is for listen. And, sadly, I think, again, Christians are often known for talking rather than listening. And if you think about it, asking questions and listening to people was central to Jesus' life and teachings. He asked way more questions than he ever answered, right? As a matter of fact, one researcher found that of the 183 questions Jesus was asked, he answered only a handful. Most of the time, he would just respond with another question. And, true listening may be the kindest and most loving gift you can give someone. I think we've all experienced those times when we've been in the presence of someone and it just felt like, man, they were so dialed in. I mean, don't you feel honored and blessed by that? I mean, imagine if you're that person for somebody else. What a great way to bless them. So we begin with prayer, we listen, and then my favorite, I think this is Sherry's favorite too, and that is to eat. Mm-hmm. To eat. It's a good thing it's after lunch. We presented this before lunch. I think I got people a little distracted talking about eating and sharing meals. But, over and over, we find Jesus with tax collectors and sinners sharing meals, right? And I think we've all experienced that there's just something about sharing a meal together that moves almost any relationship from acquaintance to friendship faster than almost anything else we can do. It's uncanny how that works. And, I like to think of it this way too. I mean, how many meals do you typically eat in a week? Probably somewhere two in a week. Oh, there we go. Brian says 21. Right. Three times a day for the most part, 7 days a week. You've got 21 meals every week. What I love about this practice is you don't have to add anything to your already busy schedule to bless someone. Instead of eating by yourself, just ask somebody to join you, right? So B is for begin with prayer. L is listen. E is eat. And then the first S in bless is for serve. Jesus said he came not to be served, but to serve. And I think he modeled for us that if you begin with prayer, listen, eat with somebody, then you'll discover how you can best serve the person that God is asking you to bless. And man, I tell you, praying, listening, and eating together, I think, ensures also that the serving is about the person being served and not the person doing the serving. Sometimes I think we get that backwards, right? We feel good about our serving, but is our serving really in the best interest of the person that we're serving? And I think if we'll take a step back and we'll pray, listen, engage in something like sharing a meal, we're going to know how that person really wants and needs to be served. A while back, our neighbor had surgery on her leg. We live in an apartment building in the city on the north side, and we were aware that she was laid up for a few weeks. And so my wife, Lisa, and I, we just went to the store, put together a simple care package for her. We're trying to live out these blessed practices. We dropped it off, didn't say a whole lot, except, hey, we heard you had surgery. Know you're in recovery. Figured this might be helpful. They have a small boy, child. And it was just a simple way for us to share the love of Jesus with them. So begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, and finally the last bless, the last S in bless is story. And, when Jesus would pray, listen, eat, serve, finally, when people were ready, he would share his story. And we can do that too. Like when doubting Thomas came to Jesus and said, how can we know the way? Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, through a relationship with me. And I believe when you befriend and bless people, chances are they're going to want to know your story. You want to know a person's background. What makes them tick? Why do you do what you do? And that's our opportunity, I think, to tell them how the love of Jesus has changed our life. So that's rapid fire, working through B.L.E.S.S, a little background on how we got there. And Sherry, like I said, one of our small group directors at Community, I know she not only knows B.L.E.S.S, but lives it out personally and through small groups and in how she leads our small groups. So she's going to tell us a little bit more about what this could look like in small groups. So Sherry, I'll turn it over to you. And I guess I will remind people too at this point, if you have any questions that you want us to respond to, feel free to put those in the chat. That's probably the best way for us to do this. We'd love to interact with you as Sherry wraps up her thoughts on small groups in particular.
Thank you, Jon. Yes. And man, I am just so excited to just see all these faces logged in here to learn more about B.L.E.S.S. As a small group director, I really believe it's through small groups where our faith kind of hits the road. And thanks to Jon and Dave for taking that the doctrinal dissertation and drilling it down and creating these blessed practices for us. I think it's a great vision. And I think it's a simple way to identify what these practices are. But in small group is where we really take this vision and mission and we drill it down, create a nice mechanism where people can begin to really practice these on a practical way. And so you see this word back here, this blessed, it says bless the world. It's a sign. I'm at our yellow box location. A community is a church of four expressions. Our locations is one of those. Yellow box is one of our locations where I get the pleasure of serving as a small group director here. But we have this word throughout our building. So people are really familiar if they come to community that bless is one of our missions. It is one of our core values. We feel we are blessed to be a blessing. And we have shared that through anybody who comes to visit community. You're going to hear us say it. You're going to see it on our walls. You're going to experience that language in our small groups. But we wanted to really take this a step further. We had a dear friend of mine, Amber and Rudy Stefanski. They really put this into practice. We use their story as a way to kind of cast vision for people to engage with the blessed practices. And what Rudy and Amber would do whenever their weather would shift in their neighborhood is they would bring their grill that sat in their backyard and they would bring it to their front yard and they would put it on their driveway and they would begin to bless their neighborhood. And that was one of the ways that they could practically kind of live this out. And we shared their story. But one thing that we realized is people caught the mission, they caught the vision, that then putting it into practice, that's a whole different ballgame. That is a whole different ballgame. And our small group strategy created a place where people could safely begin to practice these skills, not just assume. Not everybody's like Amber and Rudy, where they're going to pull their grill out to their driveway and do that. So how can we begin to give these skills to people so they can begin to practice those on a regular basis? And through small groups is the best strategy, I think, to begin to do that and to help people grab a hold of these different practices that Jon talked about. And so we have a 3-prong approach to kind of what does this strategy look like within our small group setting. And I'm going to share my screen with you. It'll just make it easier for you to kind of see what does this look like simply whenever we begin to use it in our small groups. And as Jon mentioned, we have the blessed practices: begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, story. Our small group leaders know this because we share that with them on a regular basis through what we call our leadership community. Our leadership community, so we get all our leaders together on a monthly basis, and this is something that we share with them. But we wanted to move it a step further. We don't want to just be something that we talk about. We don't want it just to be a vision or a mission that we share. We want people to begin to engage with this. And so we needed to establish a benchmark. Where are our people in our community with the BLESS practices? Do they know them? Do they know what the acronym BLESS mean? And are they actually practicing this on a regular basis? Those are kind of 3 distinct things. And so we just created a survey is what we did. We created a survey where we could survey our entire people, all our attenders who attend community, people who call community home. Let's survey them. Do they know what the BLESS practices are? Do they know what they are individually? And are they practicing them? And what is unique, and this is just a benchmark where we can begin to identify what is the gap between do people know it and are people practicing it? And that survey gave us a benchmark and a snapshot to begin to measure things. I feel like we pay attention to what we measure, and this is a way to measure that. And we initially found a gap between what people know and what people are practicing. We had about 70% of our people who call community home knew what the BLESS practices were and could articulate what that BLESS acronym was, but only 25% of the people were actually practicing it on a regular basis. So we had a great opportunity to kind of bridge that gap, and a survey just gave us a good snapshot as far as, hey, what does this look like? What's our opportunity? After that, we created the BLESS small group curriculum. So we took that content that from the book that Dave and Jon have, and what does this look like in a small group curriculum? We created a curriculum that helped people begin to practice the skill of praying. What does that look like to pray, to begin with prayer? What does the skill of listening look like? Like, what does a good listener do? And then in a small group setting, how do we begin to practice that skill? Eating is really easy. As Jon mentioned, that is one of my favorite things to do. I love eating. And I love that we have that, but man, practically, what does that look like? And this is where that small group is really helpful with accountability. So within that small group setting, within that small group curriculum that you're practicing, everybody's going to make an actual plan to have a meal with somebody. We're also going to look for opportunities to serve and then share our story. So we will have this skill set. What does that look like to share your story? What's the framework to begin to articulate, write out your story? And then within that small group, you get to practice that. And so you begin to gain some confidence in sharing your story. And understanding context too, context of sharing your story. What makes a good story? How do you build tension? You know, what are the details that are important to share? What are the details that are important to kind of leave out? But in that small group curriculum, you get to that safe setting of a small group. You get to practice those skills, and you get to have the accountability of a small group as well. We also made the BLESS small group strategy. We created a key objective for our church that we put, you know, a number on a piece of paper that we intend to follow up with and use to measure. And that key objective is that we want to see that 25% of our people who are practicing the B.L.E.S.S strategies, we want to see that improve. We want to see more people to begin to engage with that. But that's that lag measure. What's key things that we can begin to do on a regular basis that actually will move that needle? And the key objective is we want to offer our B.L.E.S.S small group on a quarterly basis, where we invite people to come and participate in this 8-week small group experience. But then we also want each of our community groups to begin to offer that on an annual basis as well. So it's offered in 2 different places where people can take this small group curriculum and begin to really engage with it on a practical way. And then we will redo that survey with the hopes of seeing that needle move, that more people are engaged in those practices, that they're not just able to articulate the mission and vision, but they are putting it to practice on a regular basis. And they themselves have their B.L.E.S.S story to share. They themselves are the Amber and Rudy Stefanskis, who they share their own story of bringing their grill to the front of their house, and how are they blessing their neighbors. But it may not be their neighbors. It could be any group that they choose to begin to bless on a regular basis. That small group, it's in that setting where you begin to practice these things, hold each other accountable, and really begin to live out the B.L.E.S.S practices, where that becomes a way of life. It's not just something that we have on our wall, but it is a way that we begin to kind of move forward, and everybody begins to participate in these B.L.E.S.S practices. And so it moves from this esoteric kind of idea to being lived out, and not just lived out from a few key individuals, but our entire church is living this out on a regular basis. And it's through that intentional small group strategy that people begin to live that out on a practical basis. And so that's kind of the simple way that we began our strategy within our small group. We had that survey. We created a curriculum that gave people practical ways to begin to do that. And then we made it a measurable. We put it as a key objective for our church to begin to do that. And so we can measure that. I believe we focus on what we measure, and that's one of the ways that we do that. If you want access to some of those resources that I talked about, you can email me or John. I will put my email address in the chat. And if you have any questions for John and I regarding these B.L.E.S.S practices and that small group strategy, happy to answer them if you go ahead and put them in the chat as well. But yeah, that's our strategy. Happy to answer any questions that you guys have regarding B.L.E.S.S practices.
Very good, Sherry. Thanks for kind of helping us see how the rubber hits the road on this, and how we take it from a good idea, or as you say, kind of a vision, to actually helping people live it out within the context of small groups. I love that. I put our email addresses in the chat. So yeah, if there's questions that we don't address, if you'd like access to the curriculum or those survey questions, I'm pretty sure we can get you just about whatever you might need to help resource you, so that you can put these to work in your churches and in your small groups as well. I did see a question here. What does it look like for the existing groups to engage with B.L.E.S.S once a year? Sherry, did you want to address that?
Yeah, definitely. So the curriculum is what we want our small groups to engage with once a year. And that is a mechanism for them to begin to engage in the B.L.E.S.S practices on a regular basis. And so that curriculum is a mechanism for our small groups to begin to use that. And there's 2 ways that they can engage in that. One would be what we would call a term group. We offer it at our church right now, where somebody can sign up and be part of our group for 8 weeks. That group is going to meet for 8 weeks, but after that 8-week period, we're going to kind of pray over them, commission them to go to be a blessing. But we also have our community groups, that Monday night at 7 group that meets on a regular basis. We are inviting that small group to use this curriculum at least once a year. And in that way, they have also a mechanism to begin to engage in those B.L.E.S.S practices on a regular basis. Within our big idea discussion guides, that is that curriculum we provide all our small groups that follow our Sunday message. At the end of every small group, we ask, how are you blessing? Who are you blessing? And so it is part of a regular rhythm on a weekly basis as far as how are you engaging in these blessed practices practically as well.
Yeah, I think that's super vital there too, Sherry, that it is that once a year use the curriculum. It's B.L.E.S.S groups that we also have. But to me, maybe even more than anything else, it's that question that we want all of our groups asking as they convene, who or how are you blessing this week? And, one of the things we try to encourage people is that, hey, prayer counts. You know what I mean? Like if you show up at group and you say, well, I was praying for my neighbors this week and asking God to give me opportunities to bless them, or for God to simply bless them in whatever ways he sees fit, that counts. That's great. And I think sometimes, we platform the stories where, somebody, did something spectacular or seemingly spectacular, or maybe, the Rudy and Amber story that Sherry told, which is great. They, did this weekly cookout. They're bringing their grill out from the backyard to the front yard, putting in the driveway in their cul-de-sac and welcoming their friends. I mean, that's a tremendous way to bless. For some people that might seem overwhelming. I could never do that. And so, be sure that you're telling stories of people that are simply praying for their neighbors, as well as maybe the bigger, more kind of like spectacular sounding stories, so that people recognize, hey, there's all sorts of different ways to bless, and certainly beginning with prayer counts. And that's, Mark has that question. Can you talk more about how you have encouraged established small groups to incorporate B.L.E.S.S in small groups beyond the actual curriculum study? Okay, I think you addressed that with that question there. Yeah, and then another question is, what's the deal with B in B.L.E.S.S? Begin with prayer. Does this mean you're praying for people on our own, praying with the people we're trying to bless, if they're open to it? Both? What does that look like? Good question, Ryan. Yeah, I'll share briefly, Sharon, and then if you have anything to add, feel free. I was talking to the previous group about this a little bit, that I have a list of people in my journal that I'm praying for close to every day and asking God to bless them and to give me opportunities to bless them. But then I'm also, I wish I was better at this than I actually am, but when I'm really on my B.L.E.S.S game, if you will, I'm also praying throughout the course of the day, God, just give me any opportunity spontaneously to bless someone. And so I think this prayer can be, sort of like consistently for a group of people that you feel like God is really wanting you to target. Most of the people on my list are folks that live across the street here or next to me. Okay. But then there's also just asking God, okay, I'm going to have opportunities the course of my day. One example I shared is a lady that works at Walgreens, and we go to the same Walgreens down the street just about, every time we go to the store, and we see her regularly. And one day we were striking up conversation with her, my wife and I, and she mentioned that she likes mint chocolate chip ice cream. It was just a casual comment. And we're walking out. My wife goes, oh, you know what? Big Apple Foods, it's a little local grocer, mom and pop grocer here in our neighborhood, has Grater's ice cream on sale right now. And they have mint chocolate chip. And if you've ever had Grater's, it's, in my opinion, like the best. Any Grater's fans? Graeters? Yeah. You got it. Okay. I think it's came out of like Cincinnati or somewhere out in that part of the country. Incredible ice cream. So it's like ridiculously expensive, like $8 for a pint. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but it was on sale for $4.99. So my wife's, we're walking out of Walgreens. She's like, let's go buy her some mint chocolate chip ice cream, bring it back. We could bless her that way. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. Walk all the way down to the grocery store and then come back just to do that. She's like, yes, we are. And I'm like, okay, I guess we are then. And it was fun. We did that. And it was just a simple way to bless someone that we see, and you don't know, where that might open up opportunities in the future to bless her in other ways. So she's not on my prayer list necessarily, but God gave us that opportunity. And hopefully, as we were sensitive to the Holy Spirit's leading, we were able to bless her in that way. I don't know, share anything to add on that?
Yeah. I think kind of a simple way that I've just experienced it in my life, and probably doing the both there. We're begin with prayer, always beginning with prayer, inviting God to just show me, how can I just be a blessing today, just in that simple practice. I shop at our local Aldi. I've shopped there for 20 years. I mean, like, and I just know the checkout, the people at the checkout stand. I shop at the same time on the same day. I typically have the same people who are checking me out. And I knew there was a gal who recently had a baby and was back from maternity leave. And I went in and it just felt like I was getting ready to have a retreat day the next day. And I was just like, I'm going to be retreating tomorrow and praying for people. How can I pray for you? Like, it really was just that simple, and ended up just being a simple way for not super deep or spiritual. We're checking out. I mean, she's doing my groceries, but just, her baby girl came up, just something to pray for. And so it's just being intentional, knowing that B.L.E.S.S is just something that I want to be intentional about. Those are simple ways that you can just kind of use it, that we want everybody to be practicing. And it's that small group curriculum that creates a safe place for people to practice those skills and then hold accountability, where you come back next week and you ask, who'd you bless? How'd you begin with prayer? And it really just creates a way for you to begin to create the habit of doing that on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Sherry, how about this on the sharing your story piece? How do you teach people to share their story? Some people are shy about sharing their faith. Yeah, this is from David.
I agree. They are shy, and it can feel really uncomfortable for people. I think that's where this small group curriculum can really help overcome that hurdle for some people that do feel awkward, where there is a way that we coach you through, how to actually just begin to write your story down. How do you write a story that's compelling, and the framework for that, so you can just begin to get those words on paper that help people who feel a little uncomfortable to do that. And then the small group setting gives you a safe place to begin to share that story, where you will come in the small group and you will share your story as a practical skill. And as you share your story, you can just gain confidence in being able to, gosh, what does this look like? Yeah, John put in there, your life before Jesus, how you chose to follow Jesus in your life since. That's really 3 simple steps to kind of begin to fill in the blanks, create a story that makes it easy for you to share. And then you kind of have the long version and short version of that. At least I know I do. I have the epic version of finding my way back to God that I can share. I also have this short, sneezable snapshot. And then, gosh, I think I find my way back to God on a regular basis. And so what does that look like, even, contextually, whenever I think about different seasons in my life where I found my way back to God? And so it gives you just a practical way, put this on paper, practice it within the small group, and gain confidence. So whenever I'm ready, whenever I've engaged in those, when I began with prayer, when I've listened to those people around me, when I've shared a meal with them, when we've served one another side by side, I can be ready to share my story. I know the scripture says that, be ready to share your story, and it gets you ready to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what Mark says here about prayer. He says that, for many, a starting point may actually be to pray for a burden for the lost. And I think that's spot on. And sometimes we even say that, when it comes to begin with prayer, part of that prayer is asking God to show you, who he wants you to bless, or that place or that neighborhood, that community, that group of people that he wants you to bless. Mm-hmm. In addition to actually, praying for them once you discover that. So it's really how you discover your mission as well as how you go about blessing people. So great point there, Mark. And then Scott for the win, for sure. If we don't begin with prayer, bless is just less. If I had a microphone, we could drop it right there.
That is a mic drop moment. Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's true.
I have never heard that before. I love
really
that.
Is. I mean, that's just, and the prayer is key. That's why we begin with prayer, because it is the fuel for that mission. And so this is a way of life. And we and then you trust the Holy Spirit for the outcome. You don't seek the outcome, you seek the practice, and it's in the practice that the outcome happens. And the Holy Spirit is really what guides that entire process. Otherwise, we are just, doing good works without faith. And this is really this is about faith.
Oh my goodness, Scott, I'm going to use that so often. I can't even tell you.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
And whatever you do, don't let Dave know about that. Okay. You guys, we have a deal on that, right? We have a pact. My brother Dave does not find out about the fact that if we don't begin with prayer, bless is just less. That's between us. All right. Little brother gets this one. All right. Here we go.
Everybody understands a little sibling rivalry. It's okay.
Just a little bit. All right. I think we have another question here, and I think we have time for maybe a couple more. So if you have anything else, a comment, any other great ideas like that one, feel free to put that in there too. But with the small group strategy, how can we avoid creating a key objective that is either too wide or too narrow?
No, great question.
Really good question. You want to take that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. I think what's helpful there is the benchmark that we created for our survey that kind of gave us just where do we begin to measure this? But I think of those key objectives are things that you can control, that you can measure yourself. We know that we want to offer this 4 times a year in each of our seasons. And we also know we want each of our small groups to offer it once a year. And so those are measurable things that we know that we can do. And in doing that, then that outcome kind of speaks for itself whenever we resurvey. And so really focusing on the things that we know we can focus on. Obviously, pandemics pop up apparently and kind of throw a wrench into all our plans every now and then, and we don't know. But these are the things we know we can control. We know that we can meet the key objective of offering this 4 times. We know we can meet the key objective of inviting our small groups to offer this within their small group setting once a year. And we always have control over that question in our big idea discussion guide. How are you blessing somebody? And so knowing that we can do those things, we can be intentional in that strategy, and then trust, that Holy Spirit to lead with that other outcome that really prevents us from being too big or too small from doing that. I mean, obviously, we want 100% of folks engaged in this, 100%. And I look at everybody on here and just think of the influence that you have. Man, if we can get 100% of the people intentionally doing this on a regular basis, gosh, it will change our neighborhoods. It will change our communities, and it really is a simple practice.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Sherry. Love your enthusiasm and knowledge. Thanks for sharing that with everyone today, especially as this applies to small groups. I think we're coming up on about end of our time here. Looks like we might have one. Is that one more question? Let's see if we can get this in. With the goal of having established groups to the curriculum, with the goal of having the established groups do the curriculum once a year, do you have something like a 2.0 version or something adapted to those who have already gone through the study, or are they just straight up doing the same curriculum? Great question. I have no idea.
Yeah, I would say doing the same curriculum again, or, bringing somebody else along to share with that. So that's what the 2.0 is. The 2.0 is taking your group, inviting somebody in, and then sharing that message with them. So we're all engaged in it. So it's not just, oh, this is information that we've taken on, but how are we as a small group now engaged in these practices as well, and then bringing other people along to do that. So the 2.0 version of that is then inviting somebody else to practice that with you and being accountable to that.
That's good. Yeah. And if somebody develops a 2.0 version of the curriculum, send it to us.
Yeah.
We can use it. How about that?
Yeah. And it really is lived out, right? It's lived out, and you would receive the stories like, Amber and Rudy pulling the grill. I think of to their, front of their house, but I also think of another small group that has intentionally chosen to bless refugee families. And that's what they do. That small group comes together. They share meals with a refugee family and they help them assimilate. And so now you get that version of the story that comes out of these small groups that are actually practically living this out.
Yeah, cool. Well, this was really fun. Thanks, everyone, for your engagement, participation, and interest. And the questions were really, really good. Michelle, Ryan, thank you for giving us the opportunity, and Sherry for sharing your wisdom.